can't remind Americans about this enough. You had a revolution because you didn't want to pay a tariff on tea. I saw this online going around, and I've seen it a couple times now. Different versions of it. First question, is it a tariff if technically it's imposed on your own country? Because we were part of Britain at the time, and they gave us a tax on the tea. Is it still a tariff? But either way, tariffs are taxes, so it's a tax. But most of the counter comments on this, something like this, go as such as, well, it was more about taxation without representation. And while that was part of it, a bigger problem and reason we had the revolution, or the Boston Tea Party that's referenced, was because not only were they putting a tax on it, which even with that tax, it was cheaper than other countries would have sold us the tea, but they made a rule that we could only get tea, and it was going to follow amongst other goods and services that we could only do our trading with England. So they're going to put a monopoly on trade, not just a tax. And as I said, this was going to lead to other things. So clothing, food, goods and services of all kinds could only be gotten and traded with England. It would have blocked us from doing trading with France, Spain, any other transatlantic trading companies or things like that. So as I said, even though it would have actually been cheaper just to go with the deal, even with the tax, they realized this monopoly was going to happen. So the ships in the harbor, they demanded, no, we can't unload this boat worth of stuff here because we're not going to take part in this monopoly you guys are setting up with this tea. But there's also a rule that what was on the ship had to be off within 21 days or something like that. I think that's the approximate number. So the night before that, the British troops would have had to gone in and take the product off the boats, the tea. That's when the Boston Tea Party happened. They disguised themselves as I believe it was the Mohawk Indians, and cleared off the boat, tossed it in the harbor. The captain of the ship was actually happy this happened, because that means his ship wasn't going to be boarded by English soldiers or be fired upon by the British ships that were sitting in the port waiting for the next day. All the tea was thrown off the boat, and then they were able to leave the harbor, because they couldn't leave the harbor with the stuff still on, but they also couldn't offload it because the colonists themselves were not having part of this monopoly. And then the after effects of this is that the Crown wanted to place upon the citizens the payment for all that tea. It was like $80,000 worth of tea or something like that, whatever it is in modern day terms, I'm not sure. But they wanted them to repay all that, so they were going to start putting more taxes on them. But then also they started firing towns throughout the area. There was like one up in a little farther north of there that Boston just set fire to. Not Boston, north of Boston, that the British set fire to. They took away their legal right to have their own courts and judgment systems. So any court cases they had, anything legal had to go back to England for them to have it judged or whatever. So they weren't going to get a fair fight in that. They basically took away all their rights, and they even rescinded the Massachusetts Charter so that Massachusetts could no longer be a colony. And it was because of that, some other things, the British took over the whole town of Massachusetts. They went to go take their guns, and that's when the 1775 happened with the shot heard around the world, and on their way to Concord, and that happened near Lexington. So that's kind of what kicked it all off, and it wasn't just because of a tax on the tea. There's a whole lot more to it than that.